Mihi atu nei ki te kaunihira Māori no te taitoka, no te hiku o tika, e mihi atu nei au ki a koe, e whakatipu te oranga o te hiku o tika. No reira, tēnā koe te rangatira. Ki ngā kai rangahau, kei wanganui a tātou, koutou kua haere mai ki te whakawhāreki o koutou whakaro, kei te mōhio tātou ki tō mōhio, ki tō marama, ki tō mātou. Koina te āhua o te kaupapa. Nō reira, mauria mai o ki te wānanga aronui o Tāmaki Makaurau, kia hono ai, kia whakakotahi ai, i raro i te haumaru o te kaupapa o te wiki. Nō reira, mā te kōrero ka mārama, mā te mārama ka mātou, mā te mātou ka ora i te iwi. Nō reira, tēnā koutou katoa. Kia ora. Aroha te whakapono me te rangi Māori e tātou e te aroha te whakapono me te rangi Māori e tātou e. Nō reira, i raro i te korowai o te tika, o te pono, o te aroha, nau mai, whakatau mai rā. Kia ora.
Ngā mihi nui ki a koe, Brad. Nau mai haere mai whakatau mai rā. Nau mai haere mai ki te wiki rangahau. Te aranui wānanga aranui o Tāmaki Makaurau. Ko Mark Orams, taku ingoa. My name's Mark Orams, and it's my privilege to be the Deputy Vice-Chancellor Research here at our wonderful university. I want to especially welcome those of you who are from Hato Hone St John's Ambulance. Thank you for joining us. A special welcome to our colleagues and partners who've joined us from Te Tai Taukarau and Kaikoui. Tēnā kouroa, nau mai haere mai ki te wānanga. And just to remind you, or actually to celebrate with you, that this is our opening event for Te Wiki Rangahau, our AUT Research Week for 2024. And the reason that we've chosen to profile our relationship that's extremely important with both iwi and Hato Hone is because this is an example of one of the things that AUT does very well, and that is to partner on meaningful research topics that make an impact and a benefit for important issues for our communities. And I'm sure you'll agree that the work that paramedics do is life-saving. And it's important that we engage in opportunities to learn how we might be more impactful and more beneficial in the terms of the work that we do in both training and delivery of paramedic care across not just Hato Hone, but more broadly, remembering that it is not just the St John's Ambulance Service, but first responders across our nation who attend situations that require decision-making that can make the difference between life and death. It's also important that we understand that we have technology and needs that are changing rapidly that impact not only those decisions, but the outcomes of those decisions. And research and a University of Technology has an important part to play in ensuring that we can continue to lead and make better decisions in practice through producing great graduates who become practicing paramedics and first responders, and also especially in working with the communities with which they are interacting. And so this session today is a really special opportunity to showcase an important relationship that we have developed between our Department of Paramedicine and our researchers, with iwi, and also with the work that we're doing in partnership with Hato Hone St John. So these partnerships are a characteristic of research that can be the most impactful possible. As a university of technology, as New Zealand's only university of technology, we pride ourselves in doing research that is directly involved with communities of practice, that is applied by its nature and in its intent, and that makes a positive difference. Universities do amazing work across the world. They're amazing institutions, and a lot of that research is focused on expanding knowledge and understanding of the world around us, and that's a worthy ambition. What's distinctive about AUT is that we take that another step. We consider that research should not only just expand our knowledge and understanding of the world around us, but actually have application to changing practice, to doing things in a way that's different, that makes a difference. This is what the focus of this AUT Research Week is this year, where the theme is Partnerships for Impact. Because what we know is that the most impact we can have is we don't sit separately from our communities. When we work in partnership with iwi, with not-for-profit organisations, with businesses, with government, when we are able to co-design the research projects that we undertake, that research is more beneficial. And so that's a major area of expertise and pride that we have here at AUT. And I want to acknowledge that that kind of approach to research actually requires an enormous amount of effort. To co-design a research project is far more difficult and challenging and takes more time than just simply coming up with research yourself that you might do in a lab or in a clinic. It requires the building of relationships, and those relationships need to build in a way that there's trust, that there's ability to communicate across different areas of expertise and different life experiences and different cultures of ways of being and thinking and doing. But all of that effort is worthwhile because we see the benefit of the results. We see outcomes where we have people's lives who are changed, people's lives that are saved as a result of doing research in this way. It is something that we respect and that I would personally like to applaud our researchers and especially those who partner with us in that research for the special effort and contributions that you make to making this kind of research happen. So thank you for the opportunity to say a few opening words on behalf of the university, especially if you are visitors to AUT. You are very welcome here. You can consider yourselves part of whānau AUT. We are a very inclusive university, a university that has its feet on the ground, and a university that welcomes the opportunities to engage with you as members of our wider community. Kia ora koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Makura pea, makuko e awhie, ki te ara tūu, makuko e awhie, makura pea, makuko e awhie, ki te ara tūpu, makuko e awhie.
Ka pai. So what we're going to do now is partake in a bit of kai in beverage. By beverage, I mean a warm cup of tea at the back. Ka pai, and this is just an opportunity for us to whakanoa. Ka pai, with our guest here. Nō reira, kia ora.
Tēnei au kātou. Titi kura, toko nā ko te ora te tahenga o te toto paua ko tō mana paua ko tō manawa. Ki tō kiri toto, ki tō mātāni ho kātou ko te Māori o haumanu, ka ora ko te ira manau hia nei, purea ki te hauora, purea ki te waiora, taku a homata tini, taku i homata rei, e tau ana ko te Māori, tau, tūturu, o whiti whakamaua kia tīna, haumie, hui ei, tai ki e. E mea na te kōrero, he au ki te moana, e kore tae te karo. Ko te hunga mate tērā ki a rātou. E tika ana me tautoko i ngā kōrero, ko wahaina ke wainganui a tātou mo tō tātou kengi tūheitia pōtatau te whero, te tuawhitu, kua hinga atu rā, i roto i tērā wiki. Kua hoki atu ia, ki te kōpū o te whenua, kia papatua anuku, ki ngā kōiwi me ngā pīrau o ngā mātua tūpuna. Nō reira, e te rangatira, takoto mai, takoto mai, takoto mai. Tērā hoki te huhua o ngā mate, o tērā marae, puta noa i Aotearoa whānui. Haere i te mea ka hakaua ingoa kei mahua tētahi ki muri. E rangi rātou kia rātou, ko waiho te huarahi ma mātou tonu, e koke haere hakangaro atu rā. Nā, kua aua kōrero tonu, he au ki te moana e kore tae te karo, he au ki te whenua e tae te karo, tēnei tātou te hunga ora e hui mai nei, i raro i te tāhuhu o tō tātou nei whare, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Tēnā rā tātou katoa i runga i te kaipapa nāna tātou e haka kotahi roto i tēnei whare, i tōtō mai, ngā kai rangahau, ngā kai ketu, ngā kai whawhaki, ngā kai tuhi, o tērā wāhi, o tērā whare wānanga, kia noho haupu ai tātou i roto i te wānanga aronui o tāmaki, tēnei ka mihi, tēnei ka mihi, tēnei ka mihi. I runga i tērā māku e tuake nei ki te kōrero, i puta au i e rā kōrero, e te tuakana e Brad, ka hore e pēa e tikana kia noho au, me te kore hakautu ki ngā mihi, kua uta ki rungi a mātou. Kei hoki atu au ki te kāinga, ka raru au i oku kaumātua, ka raru au i oku iwi, ka raru au i oku hapu, me oku marae, me taku kore hakautu atu ki a koe, me te rangatira o ngā mihi kua uta ki rungi a mātou, kua tai mai i tēnei rā. Nō reira, te tamaiti o te roroa, mokopuna o ngā tihine, puke rau, tēnei te hakautu e ngā mihi. E hari te mea, ka hakautu ki rungi a koe, nahe, e rangi, tohoa, ngai tūhoi, mauna pōhatu, tamariki o te kohu. Mōhio pāhi anhau, ki te kore ko Brad, e kore rawa ko koe, e kore ko koe, nā, e kore te kaumātua nei, te koroke, e tū i mua i a tātou i tēnei rā. A koe nei, tona punga, tona haika, te oherenga waka, mihi ana kia kourua, me te rangatira o tō kaurua tū, i roto i tēnei whare. O tia kia tātou katoa, kua hui mai nei, ngā pūkenga, ngā wānanga, e te tumu, Mark, mihi ana ki a koe, me ngā kupu kua puta i a koe. Hoi no tēnei te tuake nei ki te hakautu i ngā mihi, ka haka hoki aku mahara, ki te matatini i tū i tērā tau, ngā kōrero i puta, kei wainganui a tainui waka, i a Ngāti Whātua, kaore au mo te ki, nā wai te mana whenua i konei. Waiho tērā mā rātou. Hoi no tēnei, no te taitokerau, no te hiku o te ika, no te whare tapu o ngā pui, kā tū nei, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou. Kia ora mai tātou katoa. E re taku manu ki uta, e re taku manu ki tae auera. Ka rongo ki te puororangi, atu matakiki, atu matakaka auera. Tēnā te paenga o te awaroa, e ngā kautia nei te huare. Mataki taki, huakina, te tatau o tō whare. Ana, nā. Mauri ora.
Ka nui te mihi kia kōrua. Kua tai te mutunga o te tūwhiratanga o te ata. That concludes the formalities of this morning's mihi whakatau and opening. We invite you now to grab something to drink, have a little bit of something to eat, as well as mix and mingle and get to know people. Ka pai, me karaki a tātou. Nau mai e ngā hua o ranginui rāwa ko papa tuanuku, tūturu whakamaua kia tīna, haumie hui e, tā ki e, tēnā koutou katoa.
Kia ora koutou. Can I just please invite you to resume your seats and please continue eating, but we're going to commence our presentations for the day because this has been live streamed as well as those of you who've privileged us with coming in person, and because those people joining us online may well be choosing to come in and out for specific presentations, we're going to try and just keep to the schedule as we've published. So the first presentation I'm going to introduce is one that we've actually pre-recorded because Associate Professor Andy Swain is unfortunately unable to join us in person this morning. So Associate Professor Swain is, the presentation is around a study around the importance of the relationships between AUT researchers, ambulance services and in-hospital clinicians. So right on point for the topic for both Research Week and for today's opening session. So please just join me. We don't need to applaud, but Associate Professor Andy Swain first up. Kia ora.
Kia ora tātou. I'm Andy Swain, and I apologise for my absence today, but I'm currently in Europe. One of my areas of scientific interest is ambulance telestroke, which is video consultation for stroke patients that Wellington Free Ambulance has developed with the neurologists at Wellington Hospital. Ambulance telestroke has been attempted in only one location, which was in the USA, and that was unsuccessful. In this slide, you can see the patient in the ambulance being viewed and questioned by the neurologist with support from the paramedic. To remove road noise, both the patient and the paramedic wear noise-cancelling headphones. This is the view of the patient that the neurologist has from her office. She can pose questions both to the patient and to the paramedic and undertake an examination with the assistance of the paramedic. In 2020, we undertook a feasibility study in Wellington, applying this system to stroke patients. The overall process of care did not change, but the goal was to see if advancing patient assessment in the ambulance was effective and accurate, and therefore had the potential to accelerate diagnosis and treatment decisions. The study was published in Neurology, which is one of the two premier neurology journals. The study compared telestroke against the use by paramedics of a calculation tool intended to assist with diagnosis and treatment of stroke. The results show that when the diagnosis and treatment plans made by the telestroke neurologist online were compared with those of a different receiving neurologist in the emergency department, the accuracy of diagnosis and the treatment predicted was 100% correct. That is compared with 70% when the paramedic stroke tool was used. Following the patient CT scan, treatment could be confirmed, and the original treatment plan was sustained in 80% of telestroke patients compared with 60% of patients managed using the stroke tool. This slide shows that telestroke was very sensitive and more specific than the paramedic PASTA scoring tool in assessing eligibility for, as well as predicting brain reperfusion treatment. Telestroke was also better at detecting patients who actually went on to have the treatment, whether that treatment consisted of so-called clot-busting drug administration or removal of blood clots using a wire inserted into an artery, the so-called clot retrieval or endovascular thrombectomy. The journal concluded that the study had produced Class 1 evidence that telestroke evaluation was more accurate than the PASTA stroke tool used by paramedics when it came to identifying patients who were candidates for the administration of either hospital treatment. This feasibility study, published in 2022, demonstrated that telestroke offers a viable system for assessing and planning treatment of acute stroke patients. Ambulance telestroke has therefore become business as usual for Wellington Free Ambulance, and there is a plan to extend it across New Zealand. However, we now need to return to the original hypothesis that the use of ambulance telestroke would accelerate diagnosis and treatment. A study is now underway to record and examine multiple time-saving quality indices, as listed in this slide. In addition, the impact of telestroke on residual disability, the costs associated with the technology, and the experience of both patients and staff regarding its use will be assessed. As they say, time is brain, and every 15 minutes delay in intervention is known to adversely affect both mortality and morbidity. We are striving to reduce that by moving the neurologist's assessment to the out-of-hospital environment and accelerate emergency treatment on arrival at hospital. Thank you for listening to my presentation.
Kia ora. There's a great example of what I was trying to outline in my introductory comments about how research can really make a difference in practice. And it won't be lost on you, I'm sure, that the use of ICT, information communication technologies, is what's facilitated that kind of research and the outcomes now in the change of practice in the Wellington Free Ambulance service. So I want to acknowledge the researchers, both from AUT and elsewhere, involved in that particular project. We've got a slight pivot now, but a similar theme in terms of change in practice that is life-saving, and that's in the context of cardiac arrest patients. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Verity Todd, who's going to outline the first responder shock trial, which is the clinical trial that she and colleagues have been engaged with in this particular area of practice. Kia ora, Verity.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko ingarangi te whakapaparanga mai, ko senior lecturer ki te wānanga o Oranui o Tamaki Makaurau tōku mahi, no Tamaki Makaurau aho, ko Verity tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Thank you for joining us today. I'm going to share with you our first responder shock trial, which is a world first clinical trial we're running in collaboration with our partners from Hato Hone St John, Ambulance Victoria, Wellington Free Ambulance and AUT, and supported by the Heart Foundation. So back to the beginning, what is an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest? So an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest is when somebody's heart stops beating, the person collapses, becomes unresponsive, and is not breathing normally. So these are the patients that need immediate CPR and defibrillation or heart shocking to get the heart beating normally again. We know that every minute without these life-saving interventions, the chances of survival decreases by 10%. So it is one of the most time-critical emergencies that an ambulance service will deal with. So in Aotearoa, New Zealand, we have over 2,000 people a year suffer an out-of-hospital cardiac arrest, which is about 7 people per day. So this beautiful information comes from Hato Hone St John and Wellington Free Ambulance, who report on out-of-hospital cardiac arrests with their annual reports. Our survival for cardiac arrest events in New Zealand is currently sitting at about 11%. If you have a look at the infographic there, you can see that we're pretty good at giving bystander CPR. So about 76% of patients receive bystander CPR. However, only 6% of patients are receiving defibrillation or heart shocking before the arrival of an ambulance. And if you have a look at the time figures, we can see that in an urban setting, an ambulance is arriving in about 9 minutes, and in a rural setting, they're arriving in about 11 minutes. So it's really important that we do what we can before the ambulance gets there to improve a patient's chance of survival. So what can we do to improve this? Well, here in New Zealand and in other countries internationally as well, we're using the Good Sam app. So the Good Sam app was introduced in 2018 in New Zealand with Associate Professor Bridget Dicker responsible for this. And so so these are community responders who know how to do CPR and use an AED. So these can include off-duty health professionals, our off-duty paramedics, but it can also include members of the community who have done some kind of CPR training, whether that's formal or informal, and are confident to deliver these skills. When a 111 call is made, this automatically generates an alert through the into somebody's smartphone who are nearby to a cardiac arrest event. So usually within 1 kilometre in an urban setting and maybe 5 kilometres in a rural setting. We're really fortunate here in New Zealand that we have over 12,000 of these good SAM responders out there in our communities ready to respond to cardiac arrests. And our colleagues at Hato Hone St John have shown that having a good SAM responder on scene, giving good quality CPR, and potentially with an AED, does improve survival from cardiac arrest. So that brings us to our first responder shock trial, or FIRST trial. So this is in partnership, like I said, with Hato Hone St John, Wellington Free Ambulance, and Ambulance Victoria. The co-principal investigators on this project are Associate Professor Bridget Dicker and our colleague at Ambulance Victoria, Dr. Ziad Nemi. The aim of this study is to see whether we can improve survival from out-of-hospital cardiac arrest by providing some of our good SAM responders with these ultra-portable AEDs. So they're getting these AEDs hopefully to the site to shock patients prior to an ambulance arriving. So what did we do? Well, we contacted over 1,000 of our top good SAM responders. By top good SAM responders, we mean people who have attended a cardiac arrest event in the past. And so we end up with over 500 individuals in each group of our study. So we have these two groups. The first group are our intervention group. These guys were given ultra-portable AEDs about the size of a Whittaker's block of chocolate to take with them when they respond and when they receive one of these good SAM alerts and respond to a cardiac arrest. In our control group, we were asked the good SAM responders just to do what they normally do, which is to grab a publicly available AED. You might have seen these in places like ASB Bank and Z petrol stations around shopping malls. So if possible, to grab one of these on their way to an event, to a patient who's having a cardiac arrest, and if not, just to get to the patient as quickly as possible. You can see the map here shows where our participants are. So we've got good SAM responders involved in the study all over the country, spread throughout New Zealand there. And this is just an example of some of the other ultra-portable AEDs that are available out there or are currently under development with the look of reaching the market. So how is our trial going? Well, our trial started in November 2022. We have, as you can see from the images here from some of our good SAM first participants, we've had these ultra-portable AEDs on the tops of mountains, we've had them on jet skis, we've had them at kids' cricket games, we've had them mountain biking, they've had them diving, they've been all over, and it's really amazing to see where these good SAM responders are taking these devices. And so everywhere they go, they're ready to respond to a cardiac arrest if one occurs nearby. We've had over 360 out-of-hospital cardiac arrest events enrolled in our trial so far. And while we don't have study results yet, what I can say is that over 90% of the time, our good SAM responders who are carrying one of these ultra-portable AEDs are actually bringing them with them to a cardiac arrest event. We're expecting that the trial is going to be finished early next year, and so we look forward to sharing these results with you once we reach that point. So again, if you would like to find out more about the trial, you can visit our website. Really fortunate with my role here at AUT to also be able to work with our colleagues at Hato Hone St John a day a week, thanks to support from the Heart Foundation and our colleagues at Ambulance Victoria and Wellington Free Ambulance. And a little bit of a plug here for our AUT Paramedicine Research Day. If you're interested in finding out more about our paramedicine research, then please send an expression of interest by using the QR code there, or come speak to me afterwards. Oh, thank you.
Kia ora. Thanks very much, Verity. Just to let you know that we are going to have an opportunity for questions at the end of the presentations. We're going to have the presenters who are here join us in a panel on stage. So please, as you're listening to the presentations and you have something you're curious about, either remember it or note it down, and we'll address it during the Q&A session at the end. Thank you, Verity, and I just want to acknowledge yourself and Bridget and the other collaborators, and especially the Paramedicine Department here at AUT. We're very proud of our Paramedicine Department. We're the only university provider in the country. It is literally life-saving work, and our graduates go out there and make a difference every single day. And our research, as you can see, is making a difference as well. So thank you for that important work. Our next presenter is Sarah Penny, and Sarah is going to introduce us to some of the cultural safety issues associated with paramedicine practice, and in particular to look at the experiences of Māori and their whānau who've received acute pre-hospital care, again in the cardiac area, which is so important. So please join me in welcoming Sarah.
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko tarakiha te monga, ko Moitangiti Awa, ko Matihitihi te marae, ko Tau Maui Tapu, ko te rarawa te iwi, ko Pene toko whānau, no Matimiti Aho, ko Sarah Penny toko ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. So kia ora, I'm Sarah. I'm a lecturer here in the Paramedicine Department, a registered paramedic and also a practicing EMT with Hato Hone St John. And today I'm going to talk very briefly, because I've been given 5 minutes, about my recently submitted master's thesis, looking at experiences of Māori and whānau who have received acute pre-hospital care for cardiac symptoms from paramedics. It's a bit wordy. But essentially it's very clear, all the research shows that the burden of CVD falls more heavily on Māori than non-Māori. And the contributing factors that underlie ethnic inequities in CVD health are complex and multifaceted, but can be attributed to 3 main pathways, and those are differential access to determinants of health or exposures, differential access to healthcare services, and differences in the quality of care received. It's also clear that EMS care is a very important component of acute CVD treatment. However, we know very little about it. What we do know, though, is that there are delays to defibrillator availability for Māori, and also delays in reperfusion therapy. And both of these are contributed to mostly by delays in accessing EMS care. Specifically, Māori are less likely to travel by ambulance to hospital following cardiac symptoms, and those that do travel by ambulance to hospital often present to a GP or an accident and medical centre first, which obviously delays that access to definitive care. Because of this, we know that focused action is required to reduce the barriers that prevent patients or prevent Māori from calling 111 early, but we don't really know why these delays occur. Research from other areas in health highlight poor experiences for Māori while accessing health programs and services, but obviously the EMS landscape is unique and we can't always apply those same findings in the EMS context. So the aim of my research was to explore Māori and whānau experiences of cultural safety in acute pre-hospital care for cardiac symptoms from paramedics. I did this using a qualitative descriptive methodology with kaupapa Māori underpinnings. Kaupapa Māori research was critical to my research due to the colonial history of research and the disempowerment of Māori in previous research, and is a Māori-centred approach that involves genuine engagement and consultation throughout. It also meant incorporation of concepts such as whakawhanaungatanga, or the building of relationships, and also respect for tikanga like karakia and kai during interviews. I completed semi-structured interviews with 10 participants. They were either patients or whānau of patients, or a mixture of both, and used a general inductive approach to analyse those interviews. From those interviews, I developed 3 key themes, the first being workforce or interpersonal skills, which described the clinical skills and interpersonal interactions between participants and ambulance officers. The second, access and other service factors, which describes barriers to accessing ambulance services, as well as the impact of service factors on experiences of care. And the third, active protection of Māori, which describes experiences of heart health for Māori and the role of the ambulance in Māori heart health. Sorry, you'll have to bear with me, I am kind of whipping through these a little bit quickly, just because due to the semi-structured nature of my interviews, I don't have set questions, and it meant participants could kind of tell their story how they felt, but it meant a very wide range of kind of things coming through. But essentially, when we looked at interpersonal workforce factors, participants described the skills and knowledge of officers, and while appreciated, this was kind of very rudimentary because it was expected, you know, of that sort of level when you call for an ambulance that you receive that skill and knowledge. Participants also talked about communicating with ambulance officers, and they felt that went beyond just being informed, but also felt listened to, and that it was important that communication extended from individuals to also include whānau. While most experiences were positive, there were some experiences that were less positive, particularly around communicating risks and around communicating clinical information. And this was really evident in one participant's story who discussed that they felt like they weren't really able to give informed consent, and their whānau member actually died as a result of treatment that they had agreed to them being given. It really kind of raised the issue of how we're communicating that our clinical information and ensuring that we're communicating in a way that's understood. Obviously, this has really long-term implications around trust and engaging in services in future. Connection, rapport and trust was also highlighted as being critical. Connection being really important, knowing the context of participants was critical, and that came from officers being local or being able to see the same person more than once, and actually beyond that was actually being able to relate to people in regards to whakapapa, which unfortunately was a very common experience for participants because the workforce does not always reflect the population that we should be serving. There was also significant barriers in how we connect and build rapport with patients, and that our initial approach is very clinically focused, and often people described their experience as, you know, the ambulance officer barging in, throwing the monitor on, and very much focusing on that clinical aspect rather than actually focusing on gaining rapport and gaining trust. Partnership and autonomy was also discussed by participants, and the importance of being involved in the decision-making process and enhancing the mana of our patients. This is just a few quotes. Sorry, I'm going to have to flick through these a little bit quickly. Access and other service factors, again, were discussed, and there were some sub-themes in that. So the decision to call an ambulance, often our participants weren't recognising kind of more non-specific symptoms like pain in the kind of neck, jaw or arm as being related to cardiac issues. And there were also kind of delayed decision-making around calling, and often going to Healthline or GP first because of that, you know, being unsure of whether these symptoms were actually cardiac in nature. Really highlighting that need to ensure that there is appropriate information for Māori and whānau about the range of cardiac factors that actually, or the cardiac symptoms that do exist. A lot of issues around barriers and resourcing. So particularly for many of my participants who lived rurally, long response times or being asked to self-transport, which people found quite upsetting and felt like they weren't being heard or listened to. There was definitely an awareness that there's a lack of resources within people's area, and that can also lead to people being, you know, less likely to call or being hesitant to phone, particularly again for those rural communities where an ambulance isn't staffed 24/7, and it kind of, people almost had the sense of people like living sort of in fear where they know that they might not get an ambulance when they need it. Not everyone knew about the cost of an ambulance until after they had the ambulance and the bill was sent, or they weren't aware that they could actually join the ambulance and have a membership, and I think that came through as being an important factor if people knew that that's something they would engage with early. And there were also lots of other challenges with living rurally, particularly that there was a lack of access to other resources, which meant, you know, more reliance on the ambulance service itself. Like I already said, workforce as well was discussed, and particularly that there was a lack of representation of Māori within the workforce, and that meant there wasn't always like that ability to connect at a deeper level, particularly around whakapapa. And people really expressed that want to have more representation of Māori within the service. Just a few more quotes there. And my final theme, active protection. So participants talked about the system and how it works for Māori. And there was definitely a lack of trust in the system and a discussion about the system not being made for Māori. There was also participants describing that they had a lack of trust in the ambulance service based on not even their own previous experiences, but experiences of people within their community, and also experiences in the healthcare system as a whole. And again, that highlights, you know, one poor experience is the ramifications that can have long term. Participants also described themselves living with heart disease and the impact that has on them, on their lives, but also the impact that it has on their whānau and also on the wider community. And there was an overwhelming kind of need recognised by participants for better preventative healthcare. They also discussed how the ambulance service might kind of fit within this sort of wider picture, and obviously the ambulance service was seen as a lifeline and as essential, unsurprising, particularly given for many participants they don't have good access to other services. But the view of the ambulance service was very much seen sort of as an emergency service, where a lot of people kind of inadvertently felt that their needs were met because they were transported to hospital, and that's kind of all we needed to do, which kind of brings into question where our role is in preventative health. Only one participant really talked kind of about the importance of wānanga and that being possible in the back of the ambulance, and, you know, the fact that we do have a long period of time with participants, or with patients, that we can use that time to actually develop relationships and spend some time educating patients, because sometimes we have, well, most of the time we have a lot longer than a GP has with a patient in the back of the ambulance. But yeah, it very much came through that as soon, the expectation was that we kind of pick up, we drive, and we're done, whereas the ambulance services grow into be a lot more than that. What came through was definitely some suggestions for how the ambulance service can improve, but essentially it's really critical that this is done through co-design between Māori and non-Māori. And actually from this, I've definitely started thinking about where further research could exist, and very much interested in this preventative space and what we could be doing there. Cool, that is me. Sorry, that was way more than
Kia ora, Sarah. Whakamihi, I just wanted to congratulate you on that master's research. Outstanding and really important. So many things to draw out from it, and apologies for giving you such a short period of time to try and condense really important work into. Apologies for that. For those of you who are joining us online, can I just welcome you, and my apologies for not acknowledging and welcoming you earlier in the session. We are moving through now to the last part of our presentation part of the morning, and then we have the Q&A discussion panel afterwards. So it actually follows on quite nicely from Sarah's presentation, and she's drawn out, I think, many things that we will hear that are really important with regard to engagement with Māori, and how the disconnect between a very Western way of approaching clinical practice doesn't gel well with Te Ao Māori and kaupapa Māori ways of being and doing. So it's my pleasure to welcome Huri Campbell and Tamati Rakira to present, and again to acknowledge them travelling from Kaikohe to join us here today, and also for the important work and the trust and faith that they've placed in us as research partners here at AUT. So nau mai haere mai ki te kōrero, and ngā mihi nui for the work that you're doing. Kia ora.
Mōrena, tātou, ko huri kāmera tōku ingoa, he uri tēnei no te hokianga whānui nei, engari ko tōku ngākau kei Miti, so tēnā koe taku kaihana e Sarah. So I'm also from Miti on the hokianga just like Sarah, so mōrena.
Are we still in mōrena?
Yep,
Oh,
we're
yes,
still
we
in
are.
mōrena.
It's mōrena all the time up in Ngāpuhi. Kia ora mai tātou, I'm also from Miti. Jokes. Ko tāmati rākena taku ingoa, he uri tēnei no ngā hapu me ngā iwi katoa o te tai tokerau e kore tae te poro i aku here ki tērā maunga, ki tērā awa, ki tērā marae, no reire ko tāku e kinei no ngā iwi, ngā hapu me ngā marae katoa o te tai tokerau ahau. I am one of 4 Māori ward councillors for the Far North District Council, a business owner of a small kākahu brand called Taiao, father of 4 kids, and a privileged partner of Huri Kāmera, and thank you very much for inviting us to be a part of this kaupapa today. We're very honoured, nō reira. Kia ora mai tātou, ka hako ki te rākau kōrero ki a koe, Huri.
Kia ora. So the name of our kaupapa is called Te Manawa Roa. So it's in partnership with our kaitiaki or our advisory board, Te Rōpū Manawa Ora, AUT University and Hato Hone. But before we start, I just want to say, Mark touched on partnerships for impact. We believe in partnerships to honour te tiriti, so this is what our kaupapa is about. So Tamati's going to define what Te Manawa Roa means for us.
And once again, because Ngāpu are really, really smart, no jokes. At the beginning, the establishment of our Mana Māori Motuhake focused Manawa Ora group, we decided to go with a name that really encapsulated what it meant for Māori to have full participation and the reaffirmation of our sovereignty or our whakaaro when it comes to by Māori, for Māori, and therefore we took upon us the name of Te Manawa Ora for our board, or those who help to guide us in where we need to go. Manawa meaning heart, and Ora to mean life, and from there was the creation of Te Kaupapa, which is the first responders course, Te Manawa Roa. So Manawa, once again, the heart, and Roa to have resilience, and so that kōrero also comes from the kuaka, which is part of the whakapapa of Brad here, who's from also Ngāti Kuri. The kuaka, the god which can travel for continuously actually from Alaska to Aotearoa during a migration period of more than 12,000 kilometres. So when we think about whakapapa, we think about kōrero tuku iho, we think about the kuaka, we think about Te Manawa Ora and Te Manawa Roa. Kia ora.
So the kaupapa itself is a te tiriti-centric mana Māori motuhake model of health delivery, which will be implemented and evaluated to improve equity and clinical effectiveness of rural emergency medicine. So in short, it's a kaupapa that is governed by us, that's developed by us, that will be rolled out by us. And the kupu mana Māori motuhake, just via Dale Takitimu, in her podcast of Tūturu, actually defines it as organically ours, with our tirohanga Māori and our worldview, and also it's our decision making, and we have the strategic trajectory of this kaupapa.
Ka pai. Sorry, I haven't got my glasses on today. I should have went to Specsavers. So just to talk about Te Pū o Te Wheke. So Te Pū o Te Wheke is actually another name for Te Kaikohe. It's also the birthplace of our rangatira Hone Heke. So Kaikohe is actually located in the heart of Ngāpuhi. That's why we call it the Te Pū o Te Wheke. Te Tai Tokiro. So there's several key hapu who have had a huge impact on the development of Te Manawa Roa First Responders course. There's approximately 7,000 people, 78% of those who identify as Māori. And there's also lower life expectancy. Kaikohe has some really, really great things about it, but like many towns and many communities, we also have our downsides. So a lot of the information that was gathered actually came through our Associate Professor Bridget, who has assisted with this kaupapa right from its inception.
Ka pai. And we heard from Verity and we heard from Sarah about cardiac arrest, so it being a significant health issue in Aotearoa. So each year our stat was 1,700, but I'll go with Verity's, which is 2,000 New Zealanders die from cardiac arrest, and there is significant inequity for the survival of Māori. So current resourcing in Kaikohe consists of one 24/7 emergency ambulance with other ambulances outside the area of Kaikohe, which is like 30 or so minutes away. So 32% of incidences in Kaikohe are actually responded to by other ambulances that live outside. The stat that Verity had, so in town it takes 9 minutes for an ambulance to get to you. In rural communities it takes 11 minutes. In Kaikohe it takes almost an hour. So given the stat, you can imagine like every minute without CPR or without a defib, the survival rate is 10%. So we have less than that in Kaikohe. So the taki of our kaupapa too is to address that and also to remove barriers for Māori to contact ambulance service. That's following on also from Sarah's study, interestingly enough, that the themes that have come out of her study is what we want to address in our kaupapa. Ka pai. So the whakapapa of our kaupapa. So in 2001, Hato Hone and AUT engaged with the community of Kaikohe, i.e. Huri Kāmera. So what we needed to do is we needed to establish Te Rōpū Manawa Ora. So we needed to establish whānau, key leaders in our community that can help pull this kaupapa together. So for us, it's a kaupapa. It might be a study for others, it might be research for others, but for us, it is not. It's a kaupapa centred around whakapapa that is going to save the lives of our whānau. So in 2022, Te Rōpū Manawa Ora developed the kaupapa to improve out-of-hospital cardiac arrest for Māori and non-Māori in the Kaikohe area, also using Te Paemahutonga. In 2022, an HRC application was completed by AUT on behalf of Te Rōpū Manawa Ora and Hato Hone. In 2023, the HRC application was approved and the Te Manawa Roa First Responders Tohu was developed. In 2024, the first cohort are recruited. They're vetted, they have driver's licences, which is a mission at home, and also they have their first aid.
And just following on from that as well, so Te Rōpū Manawa Ora, or the advisory board, we do see them as the kaitiaki. They're made up of CEOs, they're made up of NGOs, they're made up of marae, hapu, iwi, local kura, Hato Hone, of course, business owners and community members. So we try not to skip anyone out of the bigger picture. I mean, Sarah's already touched on how it's really, really important to not just go in and ask people for research details, how they're feeling, this and that. We really want to be intimate and have a fair and a really cohesive connection with our whānau. And in the north, we do something what we call kapu tikanga. So don't just rely on knocking on people's doors and saying, hey, can we have this information? But actually it takes around about 3 cup of teas to actually get some information out of whānau and to have them feel comfortable with you being in their space. You know, and if we think about participation, protection, Māori for a long time we've had trauma. We still continue to carry the trauma of being excluded and being disenfranchised from the system that was set up to hopefully help us succeed, but it hasn't gone that way. And so when I think back to Te Rōpū Manawa Ora, that's exactly what we're trying to build on. When I think about the first responders course, Te Manawa Roa, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to go through tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori and whakapapa practices to be able to help whānau engage with Hato Hone.
Ka pai. And I'll just add to that, also in Ngāpuhi, we don't just partner with iwi, but we have mana in our hapu and our marae, so we partner with everybody. Ka pai, so Tamati.
Oh, ka pai. So there's this guy, his name's also Tamati Rakina, who helped develop the Te Manawa Roa First Responders course, which looks to take off later on this year with recruitment, and its first implementation to take place early in 2025, around late February. And so the program currently looks at the implementation or the learning of mātauranga Māori, he whakaputanga me te tiriti o Waitangi, and also the contrast between te tiriti and the treaty of Waitangi because of the misinterpretations of those. Te reo o te kāinga kōrero tuku iho, so because the First Responders course will be delivered as a pilot program, first starting in Te Kaikohekohe Te Pū o Te Wheke, we heavily rely on kōrero tuku iho, or the narratives, the mita, the dialect, and also kupu words that solely relate to the hapu and the whānau of that community. We also talk about tikanga Māori. Early on we thought I wasn't going to allow myself to just have a whakatau and not reply to our rangatira this morning, because I know that if I go home, or if any of my grandparents find out that I didn't do a reply, then I'd probably get my ears screwed. So, you know, the smallest details in Te Ao Māori actually mean a big thing when it comes to the wider space of Te Ao Māori.
Ka pai. And small things also too, like aligning our training dates with the maramataka, so we could have seamless learning as well. So the first phase is to make the Te Manawa Roa First Responder tohua qualification culturally responsive. The second phase is for it to be delivered bilingually, and then ultimately we would like the full qualification to be full immersion.
Okay, and so we have Te Pai Tata, or the near goals. So redevelop the First Responders tohu, which we have currently done. We're waiting for the slides and all the information to come back on that, and we're currently in the process of recruiting the participants or the learners for this very first pilot program, which is really, really exciting. Part two is to deliver Te Manawa Roa First Responders tohu, which will begin early next year, as I said, in 2025, and the deployment of that as well, because we've heard the stats of, you know, the response time for first responders, for ambulance, and, you know, Kaikohe is sort of a main hub for everyone, but we think about the response time, how unlikely it is for whānau to recoup from cardiac arrest. And, you know, if you compare that to communities, real rural communities, I'm not just talking about 10 minutes outside of town, I'm talking about an hour trip to Rawene, then you get on a ferry, you travel 20 minutes across the harbour, then you have to travel another hour through about 4 different very, very dangerous road slips to finally arrive at your destination in Mitimiti. And then, you know, what's the likelihood of our whānau having survived the cardiac arrest, if that's what, you know, we're thinking about timing, about percentage of survival rate. And so the object number 4 is the evaluation and dissemination of all of that mihi that we're about to do.
In addition, I just want to say that these are actually the objectives of the study. So these are the obligations that we have for HRC. For us, it's way more than this. This is just something that we have to actually respond to. But what the real goal for us is this. This is our pai tawhiti. So te treaty-centric kaupapa, which improves health outcomes for Māori. It improves health inequity. It's a culturally competent Te Manawa Roa First Responders tohu. It's a sustainable kaupapa for the community of Kaikohe. So it goes beyond the grant. So when the grant finishes, then what? We want a sustainable kaupapa. We want to reduce the fatality rates in Kaikohe for all. Again, what's good for Māori is good for everybody. Increased education on cardiovascular disease and cardiac arrest. Prevention is key, and education is key. And this is a key aspect to our kaupapa, is getting out there and letting schools know and let the community know, and offering training and education to them around first aid, CPR, defibs, so that eventually we have like champions of whānau, and we don't have to potentially wait on an ambulance or a first responder to be able to help whānau. We also want to improve the profile and perception of Hato Hone. We want our whānau to trust Hato Hone, and we want Hato Hone to be culturally responsive too. And we want the kaupapa to be used and adapted for other rural area in Aotearoa. Maybe not our mita and our reo and our takotoranga and our kōrero tuku iho, but they can, any hapu, you can take your own. You can use the skeleton of our kaupapa. And also too, we want to address some of the themes that Sarah talked about in her study about interpersonal skills of kaimahi or first responders. So it's a mana enhancing service. They have reo, they have tikanga, they have tirohanga Māori or a Māori worldview. They have access, so when you call the ambulance service, you know, you don't have to worry about calling because you know that on the other end is whānau and who's going to get to you is whānau. And then active participation, so building that trust and building that prevention. So those are the things that we actually want from it. So te pai tata is just for the HRC, but te pai tawhiti is what we want for our community. Ka pai. And that's us.
That's us. Nō reira, hei hakamutu ake e ngā kōrero, ko te pai tawhiti whaia kia tata, ko te pai tata whakamaua kia tina. Kia ora mai tātou katoa.
Ngā mihi nui ki a kōrua. Thank you so much for the sharing, but especially for the trust that you've placed in us as a wānanga in deciding to partner with us over this project, which, as you've pointed out, has not only the potential to be extremely important for the iwi of Te Tai Tokoro, but also potentially far beyond that. I'm also pleased that you mentioned Miti Miti because one of our close colleagues who retired recently, Mātua Donald Ripia, has retired back home to Miti Miti, so it's nice to make that connection. What we're moving to now is a panel discussion, and that's going to involve the presenters who've been here in person. So I'd like to invite my colleague, Dr. Graham Howie, who's going to facilitate that, to come forward. Nice to see you, Graham. And to invite back up Verity Todd, also to welcome Associate Professor Bridget Dicker, colleague from Paramedicine, and also Huri and Tamati to come forward to the seats on the stage here, please. So, haere mai, kia ora.
Kia ora koutou katoa, ko Graham Howie, toko ingoa. So I'm Graham Howie and I'm with the Paramedic research team in Auckland. Well, we've had some immensely powerful presentations so far. And this next part is not so much a presentation, but a bit of a discussion. And I have prepared some questions to ask our researchers, and that will be followed by question and answer from the floor. I think you're going to facilitate, Mark. Thank you for your introduction. So the theme of our session today is partnership. And partnership, of course, works on multiple levels. I'm going to start with the ladies first. Verity. You're an academic researcher. You didn't grow up through the ambulance.
No.
So how do you balance this partnership? How do you form partnership with Hato Hone St John?
Yeah, so my background is as an academic researcher, so genetics was my background, completely different to paramedicine, but was very fortunate to spend the last sort of 5 years before this last year with Hato Hone St John as a clinical research fellow, and in that role been really working alongside frontline paramedics and learning from them. And so I think all the research that we do is really supported by that strong relationship with people who are out there every day in those frontline roles. And I wouldn't be able to do my role without their input. It's very much a collaborative and partnership approach. Yeah.
So how did you bridge this gap? because as the university, we are scientists, we are researchers, so-called. And the clinicians are experts in their own fields, aren't they?
Yeah.
And sometimes we think differently, I suspect.
Very complementary to each other, I think. But yes, I think within AUT is a very supportive environment for that. That interaction between people out there doing the mihi, the frontline work, and the researcher in the background. And so a lot of our postgrad students will come through with really particular areas from their clinical practice that they're really interested in, or a particular intervention that they think we're not doing as well as we could be. And as a researcher, we get to support them with designing a piece of research that has that academic rigour, I guess, to it. They come into it from a one step removed, try to be as non-biased and help say, is this actually showing what you think it is? And if so, what can we do to change it? And if not, what are we doing? Why? Yeah, I guess enlightening in that way. Yeah.
As academics, we publish our findings, in scientific journals. How do you go beyond that and translate it into practice?
And that's where I think we're very fortunate with our partnership with Hato Hone St John, with Wellington Free, to be able to take from an academic paper, which can be quite hard to follow, a bit dry, into a piece of communication that we have a really close relationship with the various committees and components of the operational sector to really inform what they're doing with our research, but also getting that out there in other clinical. We have a clinical focus magazine with Hato Hone St John that we can publish in, for example, and getting us other forms of dissemination, I guess, as well, like conferences and. But the most important thing is really getting that out there, our operational bulletins, getting what we've done out there, because it means nothing in isolation in a research article. It's really acting on that research. Yeah.
Do you have an example?
Yeah, we definitely have examples of what we've done there. I guess the piece of work that I personally am most proud of was looking at the early warning score, which is an in-hospital form of identifying patient deterioration, and looked at that in our pre-hospital setting, see can we actually use that to support decision making about whether a patient is safe to stay at home rather than be transported into hospital. And then that's been taken on board by by Hato Hone St John, and in terms of helping to manage our really heavy workloads that occur in the winter with winter illnesses and things. Yeah.
Thank you, Verity. I'll turn to Bridget next. So you've seen Bridget's face on the screen. Dr. Bridget Decker is Head of Research at Hato Hone St John and an Associate Professor with AUT. So Bridget kind of straddles the divide. Tell us about collaboration with Hato Hone St John and the academic researchers, and I mean, how does that work in the real world?
I think it's all about whakawhanangatanga, building relationships and reciprocity. So everybody has to gain from the research that you're doing, build those relationships, really about feeling passionate about what you do, about making change and making things better, and valuing those relationships. They're worth their weight in gold. The people that you work with and the people that you collaborate with, the teams are what make research work and what makes implementation work. It's that connection with the people, the communities, and working together as a team that really gets research across the line.
Okay. I mean, what are some of the examples of partnerships that you've developed? I mean, not just, other universities?
yeah, we were, was really privileged to work with the Manuataki Whatu group at Auckland University, as well as working with Ilkua and a number of other groups, Ausrock in Australia. So we've really, it's really that team that you know, our cross collaboration with Ambulance Victoria to work on the first trial, and really not forgetting the participants in that trial. They're what makes it work. It's us as researchers who are sitting in the background helping facilitate that, but it's the patients, it's the participants that really bring this research to fruition, and that real passion for knowing that we're making a difference in those communities, that we have our Good Sam responders out there saving lives. We're working with Piri and Tamati and the Kaikoikoi community, and we can make a real difference.
Okay, thank you, Bridget. I'll turn to the Kaikoui crowd. A question for you. How have partnerships between these academic researchers and the university and Hato Hone St John, the clinical professionals, and your community members, how's that upheld the principles of Te Tiriti? And are there ways that this partnership have ensured that Māori voices have been heard and are central to the health delivery, but also to the research process? Complicated question.
The relationship, I would say, is it's continuous. Like we were speaking about before, it's not just about the paitata, but it's about the paitawhiti. So what's the long-term gain after the research, after the implementation of the Te Manawa First Responders Program? And I can see, and I'm really confident in our dealings and our the cooperation and the cross-pollination between what we've been able to create within the Kaikohe community, our work alongside Hato Hone St John, and of course Associate Professor Bridget, to say that we have had full undisturbed participation as part of the project. When we talk about the research details, we talk about the findings and the recommendations that have come from that. We've had full and undisturbed participation to be able to implement tikanga Māori, mātauranga Māori aspects of He Whakaputanga 1835 and Te Tiriti 1840, and what was promised in those articles at that time, and how we continue to reaffirm it in the mihi that we're looking at doing within the Te Manawa First Responders course. And that, you know, when we talk about the sustainability of the kaupapa, we're actually becoming the protectors of that as well. So we talk about full participation, we talk about full protection, and so that's what we're able to do in this space at this moment, and then look forward to Te Paitawhiti. And furthermore, have you got anything to add?
No, that doesn't.
What does the university or being associated with AUT add to this?
So I think, for starters, the fact that AUT actually declares themselves as a Te Tiriti-centric education provider. So that is one thing that actually we were quite happy about in developing the kaupapa, so we need to have aligned whakaaro. Also the fact that we do have academics, like we have tangata tiriti like Bridget here, and we have tangata whenua who actually work for the university that actually help us with the kaupapa, so they can provide us with academic articles to support some of the things that we know. So like, for example, Sarah's just done a study, and she's had 3 themes of her study was around interpersonal skills of kaimahi, the second was around access, and I think the third was around barriers.
Active Protection of Māori. But
Oh yeah, active protection of Māori. So we already know those things. So when we're developing our kaupapa, we already know what the issues are, and it's great to have like academics that are able to say, oh yeah, actually we have studies and findings that can actually support that as well. So it's really great to have an education provider that is going to back us in our kaupapa too, and you come with resources as well that's able to support us. So yeah, that's really important.
Thank you. Ka pai. Thank you. Now, Mark, are you timekeeping?
I'm not, but I have a timekeeper who's told me that we do need to wind things up. So
Yes, so we'll pass it back to you for question and answer. Thank you.
Actually, what I have been told is that we don't have time for question and answers, so I will just wrap up, and I'll do so by just acknowledging, firstly, thank you for giving up your time. For those of you online, thank you also for joining us this morning. I especially want to thank our presenters and panellists and to acknowledge the important work that you do and the spirit of partnership that you have shared with us this morning and that is ongoing. And that's, I think, the key theme that's come out of this is that when you invest in building relationships, those relationships become a lot more than just researcher participant. They become relationships that go beyond just the research. They become relationships where you know one another, and because you know one another in a way that's deep and meaningful, that's respectful, and that has trust as part of it, that leads to a caring that goes just beyond the project. And so the investment of time, and you can see that from an AUT perspective, what we really value here is the opportunity to do things that make a difference, to do things that matter. And we take great pride in our graduates and helping them achieve their aspirations and potential. And we do the same with our research. We take great pride in the investment from our staff, from our postgraduate research students, and we are deeply grateful and appreciative of those who choose to partner with us, because in doing so, they trust us in sharing of themselves in a way that needs respect and that can result in extremely important, long-standing and sustainable partnerships. So I want to acknowledge all of you and the others in our communities of the wider whānau AUT who invest in this. Paramedicine we featured today, but I see this culture permeate across all we are as a university. And so thank you again for the IT people who facilitated, for our events staff who've brought the kai to us and cleaned up after us today. So I want to acknowledge that. And so please join me in just acknowledging finally our panellists and presenters today. Kia ora. So we have lots of other events going on, including one that comes in here in 20 minutes' time. So we're just going to sort of roll through that. But please feel free to stay and to engage with one another. But we will have a team who's just changing out for the next session that's happening at midday. Kia ora.